Good evening. I'm Renee Powell with Oklahoma Family Network, and welcome to Toolbox Tuesday. Tonight, we are so fortunate to have Dr. Brandy McCombs sharing about interruption in typical childhood development caused by high levels of stress, chaos, and trauma. Dr. McCombs is a native Oklahoman born and raised in Tulsa. She attended Union Public Schools and was well prepared for her undergraduate studies at the University of Tulsa. While at TU, she studied psychology, elementary education, and fell in love with the Spanish language. By studying abroad, her eyes and heart were open to cultures across the globe. Through vast classroom experience with the littles all the way through high school, she realized her time as a student was not complete. She pursued her master's and Ph.D. through the University of Oklahoma. She currently holds a master's degree in educational administration, curriculum supervision, and a Ph.D. in instructional leadership and curriculum with specialization in early childhood. Her Oklahoma certifications include elementary administration, early education, English as a second language, and Spanish. She enjoys spending time with her husband of 29 years and her children. Most weekends, you will find her supporting her soccer players and coaches on the pitch, attempting to be very professional and respectful. So thank you so much for being here, and I am going to hand it over to you.
Thank you for that very warm introduction, and I'm very excited to be here on Toolbox Tuesday. I am going to share my screen, and I'm so grateful that the presentation is available for our viewers and for our participants in multiple languages. That just makes my heart very, very happy. And so I'm very excited about being a part of tonight's group. And this is a very passionate topic that for me personally, and I'll share why. But I'm just very excited about the work that Oklahoma Family Network is doing, and I'm just looking forward to spending the next hour with you. So I teach online as well. That's one of my hats I guess I wear. So I'm very familiar and comfortable with Zoom. I'm not a professional with Zoom, but I'm very comfortable with Zoom. So please, if you have a question, do not hesitate to type it in the chat, and then or do not hesitate, like you can turn your mic off and just if you want to raise your hand with the little icon if you're that savvy, or feel free to unmute yourself and just start talking. You're not going to offend me if you interrupt me, because if you have a question, chances are somebody else is wondering the same thing. So, okay, let's get started. So, I wanted to talk tonight about trauma responsive strategies at home. And so, I think hopefully my goal tonight is when you walk away, you have a couple more tools in your toolbox, and hopefully you will walk away with some targeted strategies and something that you can implement right away. So, why should you give me your brain energy right now? I'm so glad you asked. Time is valuable. And so, I want to be able to give a little bit about my personal story so you have some validity behind what I'm going to share with you tonight. So, as that was a very kind introduction and has already been shared about my education, I have been a public school teacher. I was raised in poverty. I'm a first generation college student. I have my own unique child trauma stories. And so my heart has always gone out to the impoverished. So I've taught all the way from the littles, 3-year-olds, all the way through high school. And so I've always been immersed in unique situations within the classroom from kiddos who've had some unique home life situations. In addition to that, my husband is a bivocational pastor, and so we've served on many different community, humanitarian, mission opportunities. And so I've been able to walk alongside multiple families when they're navigating some very unique dynamics within their home. In addition, we do have our own children, our biological children, but we were not done growing our family. So we decided to adopt. And so there's a picture of our son. He's our youngest of four, Corbin. And so we were very fortunate to get to meet him at 3 months age. And I knew right away he was my son. Like it's same heartbeat as when I got to meet my biological children. So he is my fourth son. I am a boy mom. Like I know how boys work. So, and I'm in education. I have a psychology degree. I have an elementary ed degree. Like I know like all of this. So about the age of 3, things were a little bit different. And that's when I was like, I got to get more education. And so because of Corbin's developmental interruptions and based upon his unique story, preconception in utero conception and post utero, I needed more education. And at the same time, I was teaching in classrooms, and myself included, along with colleagues, we were seeing a huge shift in our Oklahoma student demographic. And so that's why I wanted to get more schooling so I could understand more about brain development and I could understand more about the interruptions that high levels of stress, chaos, and trauma can play within the life of a child. And so hopefully this gives you a little bit more insight. So I'm coming to you not only as an educator, I'm coming to you as a researcher, as a community leader, but also as a parent. And so Corbin is 14 now. He's a freshman in high school, which blows my mind away. But I'm hoping tonight we can get more tools in our toolboxes, more strategies, and we can walk away with some more excitement and hope of how to better meet the needs of our own children and the lives of people around us. Okay, so who is this presentation for? It is for parents and or guardians, and it's also for anybody who has children in their life who are experiencing atypical behaviors at home. So what I mean by atypical behaviors is basically, as I shared with you just a moment ago, I'm a boy mom. Like I know how to, I mean, I literally knew how to put on mascara in the middle of a Nerf war. There could be Nerf bullets flying everywhere, and I was still steady as a rock putting on my mascara. I've been hit in the head with soccer balls. I have been asked to leave a couple of soccer games to be encouraged because I did get a little riled up. I do have red hair. It is natural, and I do get a little riled up at times. But I know how to be a boy mom. And like I said, I know all about child development. And when Corbin came along, I could see there was some atypical behaviors. And I wanted to figure out, okay, what can I change in my response? What can I change in how I lead, how I support, how I parent to meet the needs of my son? And so that's what began my personal journey. But as I shared earlier, it also was flamed by my professional journey being a classroom teacher and seeing the demographic shift within our school population as well. And just a side note, Oklahoma, we lead out in national data cycle collections for childhood trauma. So if we're not number one in the nation for kiddos with ACEs, we're typically within the top 3. So that's where I'm very passionate about figuring out targeted strategies to help our community leaders, our educators, and our classroom teachers. And so, oh, Renee Powell says, what are some examples of atypical behavior? I'm so glad you asked. Some experience or some examples of atypical behavior, especially like we could see this in self-regulation and the inability to be able to calm ourselves down to where we would see, like, for example, if you like a 2-year-old, they're starting to gain independence. And so there's this almost like a battle back and forth. So even maybe a 5-year-old would actually see some character behavior tendencies mimicking a 2 or 3-year-old. So like on the screen right now, you see at the last bullet point says age does not equal behavior. That is a huge red flag. And a lot of people will categorize this maybe as immaturity. So where you could have like what we would think, we read all the parental blogs, we're at our pediatrician's office, we're seeing the typical behaviors of like a 5-year-old or a 7-year-old, but actually the behaviors we're seeing at home are not lining up. And it may not just be within the cognitive developmental domain, like that's where mostly school academically, maybe like low reading scores, low math scores, maybe not all their sight words have been mastered yet. but it could also be in the linguistic developmental domain in the sense of maybe they're still kind of doing baby talk, and they are 4 and 5 years old. And it could also be in the physical domain, and maybe we're still struggling with our balance. And this is where, again, and I'm mentioning all the developmental domains because we want to look at our child as a complete whole. And so that could also be one of the behaviors that you're seeing at home, maybe struggling with like the fine motor skills, still struggling with balance and the gross motor skills. But the biggest atypical behaviors that we see that really, when I meet with families, it's the last two developmental domains, the social and the emotional. Social is basically like my kids getting in trouble a lot at school. They are not keeping their hands to themselves. They are very disruptive. They are maybe very frustrated. That leads more into the emotional developmental domain. They're really struggling with that self-regulation, being able to recognize I'm feeling angry, I'm feeling frustrated, I'm feeling scared, and this is why. And so a lot of our families, whenever I meet with them, because we'll do private target strategy sessions to where I meet with families one-on-one to see this is what they're experiencing at school. This is what the kids are experiencing at home, and we need strategies to best support them. And so the atypical behaviors that we typically see that are the biggest red flags is the immaturity, which is the age does not equal the behavior, that self-regulation piece, being able to navigate, and when you're in a social setting, which that is school, when, if you're, whether you're public or private, if you're not being homeschooled, if you're in school, it's a community-based learning environment. And so a lot of our kiddos, they may have that atypical behavior, may come off within their having trouble making friends, isolating themselves, super shy, things like that. And so the developmental interruption, this is also a key to where the question on the screen is what happens when children experience high levels of stress, chaos, and or trauma. And so you hear a lot within parental circles of childhood trauma. And those are typically the big ones: neglect, abuse, and then household dysfunction. But we also need to recognize when children experience high levels of stress and chaos, maybe through natural disasters, maybe like a tornado, anything, misplacement from a house fire. Maybe an extended family member is battling an illness, and so now parent A has had to step in and really help. Now there's even more research of maybe the child themselves has gone through a battle with cancer or premature, a lot of ICU time. So there's been high levels of stress and chaos, but not linked to what we think of childhood trauma. So what happens when children experience this? It's very similar to when you and I experience high levels of stress, chaos, and trauma. Our bodies are meant to disperse cortisol. And so cortisol is a chemical that it lets us tune in to where we need to be alert. We need to be on our guard. If you've ever, like for example, I use this experience or this example when I'm teaching with my undergrad students. If you've ever been on a subway or like an elevated train, like I remember riding the L in Chicago, and I'm from Tulsa, so we don't have a subway or an L train here. And it was late at night because our hotel was out by the airport. And so my senses, I always call them my spidey senses, like Spider-Man, I was very alert. I could tell you, like, I was really trying to focus on my next stop because I didn't want to miss it because it was 11 o'clock at night. But I was very aware of everybody who was around me. I was, taking care of my personal items, very aware. I was not just on my phone living my best life because I was in a very unique situation. At that time, I could tell my palms were getting sweaty, the bottom of my back, I was getting beads of sweat because my body is in the fight, flight, freeze, or fawn mode, which is the reptilian part of our brains. Same thing with kids. Well, I'm an adult and I can manage that. I can problem solve. So when our kiddos are in high levels of stress, chaos, and or trauma, their bodies are also responding that same way. So when we have that developmental interruption, that's a big one because as our kids are growing, even in utero, all the way up to 21, their dendrites are connecting, the portions of their brain are all thriving, they're growing. And then we have these consistent levels of high cortisol. That's going to interrupt. Case in point, the back part of their brain is going to get really exercised because it's getting used a lot. Well, the prefrontal cortex up here in your brain, that is where we problem solve. And so that's where we can take information. We can be like, okay, I need to solve this problem. I need to run to the store. I need to do this. I got to call that person. Oh, we're in math class now. Oh, I remember how to do that math fact. That's working memory. And so the developmental interruption is a huge, I would say, aftermath or ripple effect of when our kids are experiencing high levels of stress, chaos, and trauma. The atypical behaviors, like I was sharing with you some before, if you were to go on any Google search engine and basically type in the age of your child and say, like, what would be developmentally expected of a 10-year-old, or what would be a developmental milestone of a 13-year-old, and you're going to get AI is going to generate a list like that. And if you were to go, oh, my kid's really not doing that. Oh, we've been doing that for years. That's where we start seeing, quote, the atypical behaviors, where again, like I said at the bottom, when the age doesn't equal the behavior, you may be chronologically a 13-year-old, but socially more like a 9-year-old. That's where we have the atypical behavior. A lot of things too, like excessive lying, excessive stealing, just really struggling to conform to the social expectations, and being really having a harder time reading the social cues and the social situation as to, oh, that's somebody else's things. I really shouldn't be touching that. And this child is more of a 12-year-old or a 15-year-old, where that should have been mastered more like in early elementary years, things like that. The academic struggles, this is another when kiddos experience high levels of stress, chaos, and trauma. We see a lot of academic struggles. Your teacher might say, we're really kind of alarmed by test scores, or we're really starting to see not a solid progression in our reading level. A lot of our kiddos, because when they've gone through these high levels of stress, chaos, and trauma, that cognitive developmental domain, that first one I mentioned, it can really be interrupted, and we can see a ripple effect of their academics within the classroom setting. And that doesn't mean they won't catch up later down the road. Not saying that at all. But typically, especially within the preschool and early childhood and early elementary years, we can really, as an educators, we can kind of use that as a almost like a, okay, we need to put in some additional support. And then from a parental standpoint, like I said, that was one of my first keys to recognize the interruption of my son's personal story of how it was playing a role in his expectation and his ability to function at a school in a community-based learning environment. This is a big one, emotional dysregulation. And so I want to clarify what dysregulation is. So, dysregulation is when the individual, child, or adult really cannot control or calm down their bodies. And so, and I always tell my undergrad students, a dysregulated adult will never be able to regulate a dysregulated child or a dysregulated student. And so, a lot of our kiddos that have been through high levels of stress, chaos, and trauma, they struggle with emotional dysregulation. They really struggle with maybe, for example, and it swings both ways. You get to go to the Tulsa State Fair, and that's an exciting time. And literally, the kid, like, they literally can't physically control themselves, and they are just so over the top excited, like they're talking loud, they're just like screaming because I mean they are just excited. that, and we can see that that's a positive thing. That's like, this is an exciting thing to get to go to the Tulsa State Fair. But it could also be like just a typical day or a birthday coming up, something that we can still get excited, but we also got to be able to get our job done. We still got to be able to get our work done. We still got to go to school. We still got to get through this. We still got to do that. And like we cannot regulate ourselves. The biggest challenge with emotional dysregulation is actually the other way. And I might call this big emotions. Maybe like we're trying to get out on time to get to school. I can't tie my shoe, and I just have an all-out meltdown. If you've ever raised or parented a preschooler or a toddler, you know emotional dysregulation. But imagine that big emotion or that dysregulated response with a 7-year-old, a 10-year-old, a 12-year-old. That's emotional dysregulation, where something is going on that's out of my control and I can't calm myself down. Unfortunately, with us as adults, I'll be very transparent with you. If I have snipped and I've been very short with my family members in a response, that's my like, oh my goodness. And I realize I am super stressed about some other things going on, maybe at work, and it's going through my mind. And I was asked a very simple question from my son, but I give a very short, tight, snippy response. That's a very simple example of emotional dysregulation. And so we see back at the ACEs when abuse and neglect happen within the life of a child and household dysfunction, it's when those adults in their life, they haven't received the additional support that they need within their own personal journey to be regulated and be that high functioning adult for that child. And so emotional dysregulation is a big one when our kiddos maybe can't recognize the emotions they're feeling before the explosion, before the big misappropriated reaction to, okay, I understand you can't tie your shoe. Let's take some breaths and let's work together. Let's come up with a solution versus you took your shoe off and you threw it across the room. That's an example. Another ripple effect of when kiddos experience high levels of stress, chaos, and trauma is communication interruptions. And this goes back to the developmental domains, the linguistic developmental domains. Some of our kiddos, when they have been in extended periods of high levels of stress and chaos, they really struggle and battle the ability to communicate to peers, communicate to their caregivers, communicate to their parents, communicate to family members, to teachers. We really can see communication interruptions occur within the children. And that also ties into again, their cognitive ability to where their processing might be a little delayed. Because if you think about it, if you've ever looked back onto your life and think about a really chaotic season that you've been walking through and how your mind is kind of like popcorn. You're thinking about this, you're thinking about this, you're thinking about that. And then for you to stay focused and to be able to communicate your needs or what you're actually thinking to another person, it's challenging. And at least it is for me. And so you might lose sight of like, I can't remember that vocabulary word. I'm really trying to connect this together to be able to express what I'm needing. A lot of our kiddos, when they've experienced high levels of stress, chaos, and trauma, they struggle with communication interruptions. And it makes sense because if we've got chaos going on around us, our brains are literally going to be chaotic. I am from the 1900s. I'm a little old. I just celebrated my 50th birthday, and so that's my big joke that I use with my undergrads. Hey, I'm from the 1900s, pre-Google, pre-AI. Be patient with me. But we used to have this, I guess, terminology, GIGO, garbage in, garbage out. And it was when we were all learning how to use the computers in the 1980s, and it was all about programming. Well, nutritionists will use this analogy as well. If we want healthy bodies, We're not going to be eating at Chick-fil-A, McDonald's, and Taco Bell all the time. Garbage in, garbage out. Same thing with computer programming. If we're going to tell the computer what to do, if we're putting in fuzzy commands, stuff that doesn't work, we're going to get fuzzy stuff out. We're not going to get the beautiful programming that we want to come in or to come to be produced. Same thing with our kids. If they are surrounded with high levels of stress, the adults in their life are stressed out, high levels of stress, high levels of dysregulation, then what's going to happen within the brain and the life of the kiddo? It's going to be high levels of stress, it's going to be interruptions, and it's going to be these challenges, even being able to express and to process and to communicate with others around them. I touched on this already about age does not equal behavior. This is a big one. And like, for example, my son, who's a freshman in high school, we've had to have many talks about this because now that he's in high school, he is seen as a high school student. And so therefore, middle school behavior should be in the past. He's a high schooler now. So the expectation has been raised. Society sees him as a high schooler. So therefore, society sees him that he should, quote, know better. And unfortunately, and I don't want his personal story to define him. I want him to write his story. I want him to define him. But we also have to recognize the science behind the brain development and what happened even before he was conceived, in utero and post utero. That played an interruption. Now, will that be with him forever? I'm going to share with you some research that I find very hopeful, but at the same time, my son's age does not equal his behavior, and it's a challenge. Any questions so far? You're probably already getting the vibe. I can talk. So please do not hesitate to interrupt because I want to answer questions. Okay, so I may have already kind of struck a chord and you're thinking, okay, I can see some of these behaviors with my kids. You know, we were just had parent teacher conferences. We've got some concerns. I'm getting a lot of messages from the school about behavior that's not, quote, acceptable. The coach has been having some conversations with me. Things at home have been stressful. Okay, I'm picking up what you're putting down basically. Like, yeah, this is a little bit too much insight into my life. So what can I do? Well, I'm so glad you asked. That's where I'm going to talk to you tonight about strategies. And so I don't want to overwhelm you. I thought these are the top six that you could walk away with a really good like insight into, okay, like I can put this into action right now. And we're just literally going to go down the list. Number one is consistency. And what I want to share with you also, none of the things that I'm sharing with you tonight is from my personal journey. This is all research based and from my personal journey, but everything I'm sharing with you is multiple resource based. And so I have some resources at the end that I'm going to share with you that you have access to through the presentation. But if you want to ever up your parenting library, do not hesitate to reach out to me and I will gladly give you some awesome book recommendations and blog and podcast, all the things. But number one is consistency. I cannot stress this enough. Consistency is key. If you are seeing and experiencing some atypical behaviors with your kiddos that you're thinking, they weren't acting like this before, or we have another child and this is a stressful time right now. This is step number one, is really hone in on your schedule and offer as much consistency as possible. Now, like right now, I have a very blank wall behind me because we are in the middle of moving. And if you've ever moved, like I could take the little camera and show you, we have basically a fort of boxes. As chaotic as that is, I'm I'm being probably overzealous of being super consistent about bedtimes, about mealtime, about all the things because we got to keep this house as consistent as possible for my son's behavior to still be in the right direction. And so consistency, whether you're parenting a preschooler, whether you're parenting all the way up to a high schooler, consistency is key. And that's not only with your schedule, it's also with our parenting consequences and with our parenting responses and just having that consistency of how we are going to react, how are we going to problem solve as the parents and the leaders within this family, but also what environment am I going to provide for my child to be as much consistent as possible. The next one is to model regulation. So this goes back to that self-regulation for us to truly model it. And this is where it's a hot topic in the education world, and I've seen it on multiple parenting blogs, self-care. And self-care is critical, don't get me wrong, but most of the time, us as parents, when do we find the time to have self-care? That's the challenge we're coming across. But this is actually embedded within self-care, is for us to model regulation. If you can tell that you are getting ready to have your own dysregulated moment, aka you're about to blow your top, like you're about to have the little, if you've seen Inside Out, the little angry guy where the top of the head goes off and flames come out, your body gives you the signals before that happens. And us being a regulated adult can recognize those signals and be able to navigate it before it gets to the dysregulated segment. That's vital for our kids who are experiencing this atypical behavior. They've had high levels of stress and chaos, and you just know something's going on. That would be my first thing is look at your consistency, look at your schedules, look at your parenting consequences, how you're navigating when a child does get into trouble. Is there always like consistency in your responses, consistency in the consequences, but then also, are you modeling regulation? And I'm going to be very honest, it's challenging sometimes as parents to, we get so emotionally invested in our kids. And then there's that nagging voice of our kids reflect us. And maybe I'm just down a path by myself, but I'm going to be very transparent on this episode tonight, this little Toolbox Tuesday. But it can play havoc with us to be able to keep our emotions in check, our reactions regulated, because what then that does, that empowers us to react with our prefrontal cortex and not the back of our reptilian brain that wants to fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. It wants us to problem solve and go, okay, let's take some breaths. Let's figure out the problem that's at hand and let's come up with a couple of solutions. And even with toddlers and with preschoolers and with high schoolers, we can be consistent and we can model regulation. This one, I'm very happy to see how Sweden and Italy, they seem to like be the front runners in education globally. And I love how they are getting away from electronics. And so I'm very excited about that. So I'm hoping that that's going to hopefully influence some trends here in America. But if you can encourage and spend time with your family, one-on-one, small group, all your family together, games and hobbies like arts, clay, going on a walk, collecting rocks. The less electronic time that you can have within your family, it will have big payoff for you. Even our kiddos, like my kiddo has oppositional defiant disorder and ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And so, or attention, anyways. So I could put him on video games 100%, and he could probably be on there for 5, 7 hours. But then what happens is that took care of that time that I was able to get something done. But then it, unfortunately, that quick self-gratification, that instant gratification carries over. So now later when we're having dinner and he's having to wait in line, or at school when he's having to wait in line or have to listen to a physical human being give a 20-minute lesson on reading and be able to do independent read time with holding a book, that's when the struggle is going to come. And so I really want to encourage you to really look at how much time is being spent on electronics, and that's for any age, specifically for our littles. the less amount of electronics, phone, iPads, tablets, televisions, game stations, the better off. Playing cards, that also helps all the fine motor skills. Painting and clay and Play-Doh, again, going on walks and listening to vinyl records and holding the album and like talking to people like that, it really does help repair and from previous chaos that's been in their life, but then also acts as a self-regulatory ability to empower them to be self-regulated. It's pretty amazing how that works. And number four is additional and intentional supports. And what I mean by this is look at who is in your child's life. If you are involved in a mosque or a synagogue or a church or a Girl Scout, Boy Scout, a soccer team, a gymnastics team, softball team, cheer squad, really look at who is in the life of your child and really look and you can lean on them, the people that you trust and that you feel are like-minded, that you feel like they have your child's best interest in heart and to where that's also their goal. And I would encourage you to lean on those additional and intentional supports to, like, for example, we have a young man in our church who acts as a mentor for our Corbin because I we've known this young man for a long time. He and Corbin are very much similar stories, and he has been able to basically be a sounding board. But Corbin knows if when he lays his head down at night, he has additional people that aren't supposed to be in his corner. Like I'm his mom, so of course I'm supposed to be in his corner. His brothers are supposed to be in his corner. His dad is supposed to be in his corner. However, Jared chooses to be in his corner. That's a big shift in Corbin's brain for him to know, tell me five people outside the family that you know that you know that you know are going to be there for you. For us, we need our additional support as well. That's what tonight is all about. Finding communities like this that you can be very transparent with, that you can say, I've had a hard day. I'm struggling with this. Can you help me with this? So it goes both ways, not only for you, but also for your kids as well. Next strategy number five, nature, and more nature. This isn't just about the electronics. The more that we are in nature, the more walks we go on, the more times we sit and we look for birds and we're picking up fall colored leaves that hopefully someday they will change. I'm afraid with this heat, they're going to go straight to brown, but hopefully we'll get some colors. The more interaction we have with nature, that actually is a regulating empowerment that we feel. And it's just amazing how, as humans, when we experience nature, we actually experience regulation as well. There's so much new research coming out about rhythm. And so this is like thinking of how to play the drums, literally doing clap beats. You can go on Spotify. I'm too cheap. I have a free account because I don't mind ads and commercials. But if you were to look up Dr. Bruce Perry, Perry, and I have his name at the end of this presentation, Rhythm, it's amazing how literally he's done research across the globe and how indigenous cultures literally across the globe use rhythm and drum beats after traumatic experiences. So, like after a young person will go on their first kill, they will come back to their tribe. And as they're telling about it, because it is a traumatic experience, it's a positive resiliency building experience, but it's traumatic because they're on their own. They have to go out and kill their first animal, but they will use the drum beat 60 beats per minute, which resembles the heartbeat of in utero that the baby hears. So, of course, there's some pretty good science behind that. But that rhythm helps regulate them and helps them be able to talk it out of what they went through. And then they're surrounded by their people, their family, their tribe to help support them, which then that also just shows you about nature and additional intentional supports. It's pretty fascinating. So you can tell I can really geek out on that. So, but I would encourage you, and that's another amazing strategy is incorporating music, specifically rhythm, into your child's life. So this is really exciting research that I came across about, I'd say about 8 years ago. PACEs. PACEs are protective and compensatory experiences. So basically, it's like this. If you were to make a fist and then we feel all of our bones, all the knobs on it, that's to symbolize when a child experiences high levels of stress, high levels of chaos, childhood trauma. They basically think like a cockaburr. They've got this spiky rock that's interrupting what's going on. A PACE, which is listed right in front of you, they're under two categories, relationships and resources. A PACE will come along and act as a buffer. It will mitigate, it will lessen the effects of those high levels of stress, chaos, and trauma. And so when I came across this research, it was so incredibly full of hope for me as a parent. Corbin had had a really rough day at school. I'd already had multiple conversations with the principal. It was a rough day. And I just needed some type of light at the end of the tunnel that wasn't a train coming at me. And when I came across this research, I held on to it. And it's basically what we would think of for all of our kids. We would love for this to be the blueprint for all of our kids to grow up before they go off to college. Thank you, Renee. That's perfect. And so there's a resource in the chat box. Thank you for looking that up. And so this is what the PACES research is all about. It's the protective and compensatory experiences. Basically, these were intentional experiences that individuals who self-reported that they did have childhood trauma before they were 18, but they also had these present in their life. Not all of them, but the more you have, the better. So then, as they were adults within this study, they were not repeating the abuse. They were not repeating the neglect. They were not abusing the drugs and the alcohol. They were in functioning, thriving relationships. What we would call they were resilient adults. But why were they resilient when they had all that high levels of stress, chaos, and trauma? They had these also in their life. These intentional relationships, these intentional resources buffered out or mitigated the ripple effects of the high levels of stress and chaos and trauma. And so I really want to encourage you. When I got this list and I read the research, I literally printed it off and I started checking off like, okay, what is present in my son's life? Like, does he have these? And I realized under relationships, having a best friend, he struggled with that because he's everybody's friend. He's a Labrador puppy. He's the life of the party. But guess what? Some people like Labrador puppies for about 5 minutes and then they're ready for the Labrador puppy to move on. Have you not seen, is it Marley and Me? Yeah, like we like Labrador puppies until they eat our house and then we're ready for the Labrador puppy to go away. Some people love Labrador puppies and they have the tolerance and their self-regulation to live with a Labrador puppy. So I realized that was a challenge because again, when Corbin shows up, the party is on. And so that's great, but not long term. And so that's when I realized. And then also, this is how we started our mentorship with Jared because I knew we had people in Corbin's life, but did Corbin know he had people in his life? That was the trick because these paces were all self-reported. The adult who looked back on their childhood and they knew they had high levels of stress, chaos, and trauma, but they also recognized they had these present in their life. And so, therefore, I wanted to intentionally put that mentorship program into place. And I wanted Corbin to know, like, this is why we're doing this. And I told him, I was very transparent with him. And it was before he became a teenager. I said, there's going to be a day, time, and place because I've been a parent of a teenager before. This I know is true. And I was a teenager. You're going to lay down in bed one night and feel, woe is me. Nobody's in my corner. I feel so defeated. It's life is hard. And you're going to feel that. But I want you to know that you know that you know even if you don't think you can talk to me about something that you think is personal, maybe a little embarrassing, maybe you're not that comfortable talking to your dad about it, or to your three older brothers, or to your two sister-in-laws, but two sisters, you've got another person. So that gives you more people in your corner, and you've got more people that you know that you know that you know are there for you. And they want to see you cross the finish line and be a thriving adult. So you can see basically all the research came down to when children who are experiencing high levels of stress, chaos, and trauma, when they have these intentional relationships and resources in their life, it mitigates and it buffers out the ripple effects of the stress, chaos, and trauma. And so I want to give you some additional resources. And so these are all or the ones that are underlined are hyperlinked. And so there's some recommended books. The Body Keeps Score, Help for Billy, and Hope Rising. I really would encourage you, if anything I talked about tonight, you're wanting more of, those would be the top three books. And if you're thinking which one in particular, feel free. I think I left my contact information on the next slide. Feel free to email me. And if you want to share a little bit about like what you're really targeting the resource for, I can direct you in the right way. Because if you were to go onto Google and to search or go to Amazon, there are so many resources out there that it can be very daunting. Under the learning resources, and the ones that are hyperlinked, they could be websites, podcasts, or videos. And so those are specific resources that I've used to generate this information, but also that I thought would be really helpful for you as a parent or a guardian. And then, as I said, any and all resources by Dr. Bruce Perry. You can go on his website. You can just go to Spotify. He's got multiple books. The latest one is What Happened to You. It's co-authored by Oprah Winfrey. It's a very good book. But his whole story, I don't even know the time if I have time for. Okay, I'm gonna tell this quick story. Dr. Bruce Perry, he has multiple degrees. One of his degrees was psychiatry. So he was actually in medical school before childhood trauma was a thing. And so childhood trauma is only from the 1995, 1997 study. So this is still fairly new. So when they came to children in his studies, they were basically like, children are resilient, they're fine, move on with life. So that's was his education. So he's a practicing psychiatrist, and he starts getting appointments for children. And his first book, The Boy Who Was Raised as a Dog, is his personal story of how he got into understanding childhood development and the interruption that stress, chaos, and trauma play. Because up to that point, the medical field was like, kids are resilient, they are fine. Whatever levels of stress, chaos, doesn't matter, they'll be fine. Well, we know that is not the case. And so The Boy Who Was Raised as a Dog is Dr. Bruce Perry's first book. And it's a hard read. I'm going to be very transparent. It's not a book you sit down and read it cover to cover, at least for me. I was able to read it in chunks because names have been changed, but there's some graphic. We're having a situation with the interpreter, so as long as somebody can hear that. It can be a little challenging to read such heavy situations that young children have been through, which it was for me. But he's very transparent on how he learned about brain development and how he went back to figure things out to better support the children. And then now he's an advocate for mental health for children, but then also he is a great advocate for getting support for parents and educators, to where they can have the resources they know and they can have the knowledge. Okay. I guess I apologize. I guess I didn't put my information. I will put it in the chat box right now. So with that being said, can I answer any questions? I'll stop sharing. I'm going to put all my information in the chat box. I'll put my email.
Oh, sorry, Eric, are you still having trouble hearing Alberto? Here, I'll go to see if I can go to the Spanish. I'm sorry.
Oh no, you're fine.
Uh, See, Erica, can you hear? Okay, cool. Gracias. Okay. Um, ooh, here, I'm gonna turn my camera on. Um, what might be some strategies that an educator could use in a classroom? Say if you've got, I don't know, 25 kids and most of them are neurospicy and I just, how can you bring what can you give us some strategies on how to maybe handle a situation like that?
100%. So, what I always tell my undergrads who are either they're already in the classroom and they're emergency certified or alt certified, and that or my teacher candidates who they're traditional undergrads and they're getting ready to go into the classroom. Number one is very similar to what I shared earlier. Number one, the consistency that there's a lot of things we can control before the episodes happen. So before even children enter into our classroom, setting up our classroom that is age appropriate, developmentally appropriate, and that we are the regulated adults. I always tell my teachers, you are the thermostat. So when you are very short-tempered or you feel like you're on edge, it's your class is going to be on edge and it's also going to be short-tempered. So there's things that we can do even before our students arrive. Now, during the situation, number one, I always tell my students, number one, always follow your school's policies because some schools they offer walkie-talkies, they have a planned, like if a child is having a meltdown or an episode, number one, always follow your leader's guidelines within your school and know that before you even start the first day of school. Know your leaders' guidelines within the school. Number two, keep everybody safe. I've had to evacuate classrooms before when a student has had an episode and the book was throwing. So I'm like, I got to get the other 26 out of the room because that was our school's protocol. My school's protocol. I was not certified in the body restraint, so I could not put my hands on that child. So our school's protocol is for me to number one, get the other students to leave the room and then keep eyes. So I had my eyes on my student that was having the meltdown, and then I was able to get my other students into our neighbor's class across, which again, too, we'd already had a conversation. It's very much similar to we know how to do a fire drill, we know how to do a tornado drill. Do I practice that with my students? Well, no, but I have conversations with the adults around us. Also, another one, more and more research is coming out. And this is what I'm referring to before a meltdown, like before a book is being thrown. Like your teachers get to know their students really quick. And we cross the midline, so the midline is literally from the top of your head in between your eyes, your nose, your mouth, all the way down. When we cross the midline, we interrupt the loop that's going on in our brain. And typically, what happens when an individual is being dysregulated, there's a loop going on in their brain. Like they're very frustrated, they can't see straight, they're hyper focused on one thing. When we cross the midline, whether we're taking our right hand touching our left knee, our left hand touching our right knee, or we had this in our hallway because our hallway was carpeted. We had duct tape and we had a big figure eight. And so I had a student that I could tell was getting a little uncomfortable. And I would say, hey, Suzanne, why don't we take a walk? So I could stand at my classroom door. I could still see my 26 other students. Suzanne could do walk the figure eight. And by crossing that midline, even on the walking path, it helped break up the loop. Some other strategies, same thing with the drum beat. I had a 3-year-old when I taught 3-year-olds.
Mhm.
Oh, can you hear me? I had a 3-year-old who, by the time she was in my classroom, she was in her 13th foster home. So those are horrible statistics. And so she was a runner, she was a climber, she was a screamer, she was a hitter, she was a biter, all the things. And so was reading the research on Dr. Bruce Perry with rhythm. So I had a metronome, I'm so sorry, I just swallowed. And the metronome that like in music that keeps the beat, I had that app on my phone and I would have it play in the background to keep that beat. And then I put a rocking chair in my classroom. It wasn't overnight, but that was a strategy. I would help her. I'd say, let's go rock in the rocking chair. And when she would be rocking, because she was very high on her language, like her ability to communicate was very high. And I said, this would be a great place for when we're feeling sad, when we're feeling scared, we can come sit in the rocking chair. And it took some time, but hearing that beat in the back of her classroom, which the rest of the kids didn't even recognize it, that helped regulate her, and then also coming over in the rocking chair. Some other strategies that I've used is having, um, oh, do we need to try muting the original?
No, no, no. I'm
Oh,
sorry. There's some but we're working on
you're good. You're good.
interpretation stuff.
And so
Sorry.
some other, no, you're good. Some other strategies is also incorporating art and music. Like there are so many research articles about how healing art and music is and how those are tools to help regulate. So whether you're in a small group instructional time, a classroom of 30 plus students, even if I was teaching middle school English, I would be incorporating like all those things about the games and the less electronics, art, nature. I would be incorporating all of that if I was even teaching eighth grade algebra. I would figure out ways to get all of that in there because encouraging students to be a part of games and encouraging those opportunities to be interacting with nature and art and music, those are also some research-based strategies that will help all of our students whether they need help with regulation or whether they need help kind of recovering from what's gone on at home before they arrived at school.
Thank you. In the chat, Andrea Bauer asked, as an early interventionist, how would you breach these ideas with families where this is possibly a cause of developmental delay?
Perfect question. So I've had to actually do this. So if you're during intervention opportunity and so let's talk about this. Say the parents have already brought the concern to you about some behaviors. And so now we can talk about some targeted strategies at home. How I always approach this with parents is I always approached it in the sense of fitting together a puzzle because this is what a child is. Literally, a child until they become an adult. And again, our culture is very iffy about when a child becomes an adult because they can start driving at 16, they start voting at age 18, go to the military at 18, but go off to college and not be able to rent a car till they're 23. So being an adult is a really confusing um, rite of passage in our culture. So, but basically, until the child becomes an adult, they're putting together a puzzle. And so, how I'd always present this to my parents is I can only bring the perception of my role in your child's life to whether I'm meeting with your child on a one-on-one and we're doing counseling sessions, because that's one of my other hats I wear, or I'm an actual school teacher and I'm seeing your child in the midst of 26 other within the same calendar year peers. I can only bring that insight to the table, just like you can only bring your insight as a parent to the table. Just like when the child goes to the pediatrician's office, they can only bring that insight to the table. But what's happening is when we're starting to bring all these different perspectives, now we're starting to get puzzle pieces. Now we're starting to fill in the whole picture as to what's going on in the life of my child. And so one puzzle piece could be let's look at these strategies because these are research-based strategies. This benefits kiddos who have experienced high levels of stress, chaos, and trauma. And so, with that being said, we know that these are good parenting strategies to begin with. So, what if we were to look at these and go, what do we do these strategies? Like, how consistent are we? How regulated are we? Let's really take the time to kind of disconnect ourselves in the sense of I don't want to like say we're not being a good enough parent, we're not doing that, but we're really looking and go, okay, we know these are research-based strategies. We know this could be another perspective that's being brought to the table. How much of this are we doing? And let's see, like even those paces, that checklist between relationships and resources, that is research based as that helps mitigate and help repair the life of a chaos or trauma or high levels of stress. So, what of those are present in the life of your child? Yeah, that I did not come up with that. It was from a mentor, but I love the puzzle. It helped me. And also, I'm a puzzle girl. I like puzzles. But I think it alleviates the pressure off the parent. They don't have to know it all. And I think too often, it's like me, I'm just going to be, again, I'm very transparent through this evening tonight. My fourth kid was my fourth kid. And again, I've got multiple degrees. I should know how to do this. That's where I've leaned on other people because it's okay to not have all the answers because I'm not the same person I was 20 years ago when I was parenting, and he's not the same individual. And I don't want him to be the same individual. I want him to be him. And so if we look at it from a puzzle piece, that empowers me to lean on other experts who have enlightenment and insight as well.
And Andrea had said that, right, and life happens to all of us, illness, disaster, and lots of uncertainties. Not always our fault, but our responsibility to look at that piece. Thank you for your help and language this evening. Uh, I have another question. If you have, I taught briefly in a real small setting, but I had a child that was telling me about some violent, graphic things that he saw on YouTube and brought it to the parents' attention and just nothing. And I didn't know how to breach that topic with the parent, because that's a real sensitive one, and it was insanely graphic involving harmed animals and things like that. How I didn't even know that was on YouTube, but how might you breach that conversation? Because I didn't, we were not successful in communicating with that family.
Well, and that, no, unfortunately, that is actually more often than not because, again, not everybody has the same outlook or of exposure that we feel like children should have. I mean, like, for example, I know all of us could go to the grocery store and see a 6 month old interacting with the phone. And by no means am I sitting here saying no 6 month old should ever touch a phone screen. I'm not saying that because we're going to have the television on in the background, we're going to have stuff. So, exposure, everybody has different degrees of exposure, not only to the amount of time, also to what you're being exposed to, etc. And so number one, if it was brought to your attention from the child, and it's in your setting. So it's like, for example, in your classroom or wherever your part of your group, your leadership role plays within that organization. Now you have the green light to have a conversation with the parents because again, it was brought up to you by the child. It's in your surrounding, your organization, your setting, and therefore you can say, can we have a private conversation? And then I would say, just very transparent, like you said, this is what was brought up to me by Suzanne. And I keep saying Suzanne because that's my middle name. Suzanne had shared with me during small group. And the story she was telling, I'm going to be very transparent with you because I teach second graders. Um, it was alarming because I want to share with you this is what was said. And I don't have all families don't have the same level of understanding or time within whatever show or amount of electronics. But it was alarming in the sense of I can understand when those graphic images, it can actually carry over to other areas of the child's life. And I just wanted to, number one, bring this to your attention, because it is a concern because we're a community-based environment. And so therefore the conversations that are being had by the children, other children here, and unfortunately, I know how kids' minds work, and another child's going to have a a struggle with that. And that's how I would have approached it, in the sense of, this is how it got brought up, because we are a community-based learning environment. Other kids are hearing, and we all have different, because it's not my role. And that's what I always tell my undergrads. We are not the judge and the jury. We cannot come in and say your parenting styles, da 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 da, or I don't appreciate your parenting styles, da 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 da. That's not my judge jury to decide. But what is my judge and jury is when it's affecting my classroom, because that's like kind of like my domain, and it's my environment. So if like it's a small group setting, to bring it to light to this parent's mind of, this is what's being shared at school. It's not age appropriate. Fortunately, because I am a classroom teacher, I know second graders, and I know what's developmentally appropriate and what's appropriate for school, or what's appropriate for whatever background you're talking, like if it's group therapy or whatever. And unfortunately, those conversations like that and those descriptions, they actually could be a trigger, or they could set another student off, because I don't know everybody's backgrounds. Where your child, I can see, has incredible supportive parents and things like that, but this could be maybe the sharing of this. It's just, again, not age appropriate. It's not the appropriate for the environment and the culture that I'm wanting my classroom to be thriving in. That's how one of the avenues I would have approached it by. Um, it's also hard whenever we talk about these scenarios, because, of course, I'm a big reader of facial expressions. And so I'm going to change that conversation real quick, because you can tell the body language of the parents. But I would say number one is expressing how it interrupted your environment. Number two, the age appropriateness, because obviously that's what set off your alarm, was that this was not age appropriate. And then number three, the interaction that that would play within the environment and the culture that you're trying to create within your organization. That's a great question. And unfortunately, it's
Thank
very
you.
relevant.
I had that I had kind of his mom had come in and he looked point blank at me and pretended like he was shooting me, looked me straight in the eyes. That was pretty crazy.
And
It
in this
just
day and age, and that's another thing how I would also approach it, is unfortunately in the society that we live in, the amount of violence that does occur in school settings and in corporate gathering settings, we have to take these things very seriously. And this is the world we live in. And with that being said, in combination with the age developmentally appropriateness, I've got to have a very sensitive conversation with you, and however I can best support you and your family to where we can limit this and not have it in my classroom or have it in my at our organization would be greatly appreciated. And I want to best support you to navigate that moving forward.
those are fantastic words. Wow. I need you to come talk to me.
We
Um,
do a lot of conflict resolution. So one of the other hats, my husband and I have a nonprofit, and so we do a lot of conflict resolution within organizations and within families, like family mediation. And also I do a lot of mentoring with classroom teachers, because being able to communicate with parents and families, it's not easy. And because again, if you're communicating with a parent or a family, you're communicating about their child. And we all have papa bears and mama bears luring inside of us. And so if somebody wants to have a conversation with me about my kid, I'm automatically like, okay, what how big of a guard do I need to be put on here? But if I can like say, listen, I'm like, we're in this together. Back to like the puzzle piece. I'm helping you. Like we're linking arms together. And if we can come across authentic to be there for the parents, I think that's a game changer.
thank you.
Yeah.
Um, can everybody hear Alberto if you're speaking in Spanish? See? Okay.
Sí, perfecto.
Okay, gracias. Well, does anybody have any any questions that have not been addressed or asked thus far. You could put it in the chat or raise your hand and we can call on you, but we would love to make sure that you get the most out of having Dr. McCombs. Thank you so much for coming. Okay. Josh Davia says even video games can have those type of content being introduced to our children, unfortunately. And when you have 30 other children, what can you do? Because it's not always easy to give one-on-one attention to each child, but it can carry over and be harmful to other children. I am still learning.
Oh, 100%. And so,
I have
and
so much
Josh,
to learn is what he meant.
I'm
Sorry.
assuming that you're like at a school, and so that's where you have the 30 other children. Number one, if it's in a school, oh, okay, childcare center, okay, yeah. Yes. So especially childcare center, because if your organization allows the students like iPad time or Chromebook time or phone time, unfortunately. And if there's not the firewalls that are put up by your organization, then they can get on anything. And if it's becoming a concern and you don't have the authority to lock that down, I would advocate for that authority to your leadership. And I would be the first one to say, this is becoming a problem. And it's not you. One individual, you are 100% right, Josh. If I had 30 students, even with my education level and my experience level, if I had 30 students that had 30 devices, or let's just say out of 30 students, let's just say five students, 1/6 of the group had their devices without firewalls, without breaking, like limiting what access they can get onto. They know how to work it better than I do, and they know exactly what to find because they're curious. Don't touch something that's hot. What are we going to do? We're going to touch it. They're going to go to it. So number one, if there's no firewall protection and there's no limits and boundaries placed by your organization, number one, have the talk with and if you don't have the ability or the authority to say no device time within your structure of leadership, then I would say advocate to your leadership and get that taken care of. Number two, another strategy I've seen happen is we talk about accountability, because if even as young as first grade and second grade, you could have accountability discussions with the students to say what accountability is, why we have accountability, because there is bad stuff out there. Let me rephrase that. There are inappropriate things that need to be shown in a community setting as to like what we are right now. We are in a community setting, so therefore I don't want to watch a video about Spider-Man because I'm not a superhero person. Just like you probably don't want to watch a video over how to crochet. I want to watch a video over how to crochet. So we need to be respectful of what's going on in the environment. So there's a thing called or what's going on in our community. There's a word called accountability. And so basically what that means is I should always be able to see what you're looking at on your screen, and it needs to be respectful of the environment of our community members. And so when you are on your device, it's always going to be turned away to where we can all see it. Now, again, in a child care center, that's challenging because you're probably moving around. So that option again may not work. I'd use that strategy when we had independent reading time, because all of our reading curriculum was on our students' iPad. And so therefore the students had to get on their iPads because they had to have so many hours logged in, because that was the agreement from the district to the curriculum. So with that being said, if they were on their iPads, it had to be at my eye level while I was doing small group instruction, and I had to be able to see what was on their iPads at all times. So number one, see if you have the authority to limit. Number two, I would talk to your leadership. And then number three, I would have a serious like teaching opportunity about what is accountability. And so where we could always keep our screens visible for everybody to see, because again, this is a community atmosphere. We want to be respectful of the community. Yes. And I see you said I think they have access more at home than at the center, but they learn from those things and bring these stressors into the center sometimes. Oh, 100%. Unfortunately. And another conversation to have is the what we talk about and experience at home. This is what we're going to do here. I mean, it's literally changing and defining the culture of what your organization, what's going on there to buffer out what's going on outside the world. And so that's also, the door swings both ways in the sense that I always tell my undergrads, you are the human thermostat. You may be the only regulated adult in that student's life. You may be the only adult in their life that makes eye contact, that isn't answering their questions while talking on their phone, that actually listens to their stories, that actually pours into their self-worth and well-being. You may be that only adult. Same thing with this example. This is our culture of our classroom. In our classroom, this is what we do. In our culture, we speak about things that are encouraging. We speak about things that are hopeful. We speak about things that are kind. We do not speak about things that are hurtful. We do not speak about things that are a destruction. And this is this is our organization. This is how we're going to run. It almost sounds like utopia type, but that's where we want to set up that age appropriate environment. Even though our kids are, unfortunately, they're not living in an age appropriate environment if they've got devices because the whole world is at their fingertips. There was a commercial I saw last week through social media, and it was like spot on. It was this dad putting this kid to bed, and he had his iPad on the table, and he said, "Okay, I'm going to go ahead and go to bed." And he goes, "You just need to ignore that man in the corner." And it was a cyber, like a hacker, like a computer hacker. And he goes, "Oh, and by the way, just ignore this." But it was like images that would be easily accessed on the device. Now, you sleep well, good night. And it was very visually alarming of when we give our kids the devices, literally, we're inviting all of this into their bedroom. And that's the reality. And so that's why I'm so proud of the more and more research that's coming out of let's not give the kids devices and let's get them off of it. And so you can tell I'm a little passionate about it. I could tell, like, my kid still doesn't have a phone, and he's a freshman in high school. He didn't have a phone. So we're that family, but he cannot handle a phone, and because of his brain development right now. And like I always tease him, isn't it fun to have a mom who knows about brain development? Isn't it just great? And he's like, yeah, it's just great. I'm like, I know it is, but it's just for his protection, he is not ready for that. And we still do computer checks and all of that. Okay.
Well, did we have a chance to address everybody's questions? I popped in the chat, just the Oklahoma Family Network, training calendar, because we've got, some awesome trainings coming up. Toolbox Tuesday, we're having, Aaron Shepard come talk about the ARC at school. On 12/9, we're having Strong Dads. So it's December for the dads for Family Matters. Coming up on the 28th, effective communication. We have one on 11/4, sibling rivalry, and creative consequences. And I just wanted to again thank you guys for coming. We do have a short survey that if you could be so kind as to fill out. We would really appreciate it. Let us know how we're doing. And if you ever have any, and I will be sending out a list of the resources that we discussed today, as well as Brandy's communication info. And I had a couple people ask for certificates of attendance. And if you need one of those, email me and I'd be happy to get that out to you. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I have left off, but again, thank you so much for coming, and just check out the OFN events calendar. It's a great place to see some, learn a lot of awesome things. But thank you so much.